Following the lame path set by Rockstar Games with GTA Online, EA has decided they're going to block the game Apex Legends completely on Linux platforms, including Steam Deck. And they announced it in a tweet of all things. We're sharing today that Linux and Steam Deck using Linux will no longer be able to access Apex Legends. Well, that's very legendary of you. Our dev team wanted to provide a bit more context into this and share some of the decision-making process that helped us make this stupid decision along the way. As mentioned in our prior... Okay, I said that. I added that last part. As mentioned in our prior anti-cheat dev blog, competitive integrity is a top priority for our team, and there are many ways in which we're battling cheaters. This is one to add to the list. Except other games work on Linux just fine and don't have that big of a problem of cheating, so maybe it's not that. We remain committed to more regular updates on topics like this and appreciate your continued reports. I like to report that you're lame and you're doing something that is very lame. Hopefully you appreciate my report. So what is happening? In our efforts to combat cheating in Apex, we've identified Linux OS as being a path for a variety of impactful exploits and cheats. Like what? Give me an example, please. As a result, we've decided to block Linux access to the game. While this will impact a small number of Apex players, what number? Tell us how many people use it on Linux. How about? But of course, you're not going to say that because then you would be admitting a bad decision. We believe the decision will meaningfully reduce instances of cheating in our game. If it's a small number of people and you have a massive amount of cheating, how is that possible to make any sense? That just doesn't even compute, right? Linux is used by default on the Steam Deck. There is currently no reliable way for us to differentiate a legitimate Steam Deck from a malicious cheat claiming to be a Steam Deck via Linux. Okay. This is something that is a very annoying thing because I'm very curious what is the justification for these things. Like, I would prefer, if someone wanted to just say, we don't care about Linux, we're not going to support it, then I'd be more respectful to that. But it doesn't feel like that's what it is. They're trying to say that there's a lot of, it's rampant here or whatever, but it's also a small number of people. It's very confusing. This is their decision-making process, apparently. The openness of Linux operating system makes it an attractive one for cheaters and cheat developers. It's a very complicated thing to do. You're basically, the games that are running in this, like Apex Legends is not made for Linux. It's made as it's available as a Proton-based type of compatibility thing. So making cheats on Linux to affect a game inside of Proton is very complicated because there's also Wine involved. There's Proton, of course, it's involved. Steam itself is involved. Like, there's so many factors that it's not a simple process of like, oh, it's very attractive for cheaters and cheat developers. Linux cheats are indeed harder to detect, and the data shows that they're growing at a rate that requires outsized level of focus and attention from the team at a relatively small platform. So it's a lot of cheaters, but a small platform of users, which makes no sense. Like, how can you have a lot of people doing, like, what percentage are you saying are players that are on Linux and are cheating versus not cheating? Like, do you have that data? I would assume you would say that you do because the data shows, but you're not showing any data whatsoever. So it's just take our opinion for it. This is definitely the case. There are also cases in which cheats for Windows OS get emulated as if it's on Linux in order to decrease the difficulty of detection and prevention. That doesn't even make any sense. Like, making a Windows cheat work in Linux is very complicated, and also doesn't really make any sense like it would possibly work because modifying Wine in even a slight way would be able to be detectable with these anti-cheats. So I don't know what that means. Like, how is it being emulated? I would love to see an actual report of data and all of that. Like, if you would come out with legitimate reasons, I would love to see it just as a person who's a reporter, just to see that information, and also a Linux advocate. But it'd be fascinating to see like what the actual technical aspects of how this all would work or not work. I would love to know that information, because every time a company comes out and says, hey, we're gonna remove support, it's because they give us terrible, like, nonsensical data that they claim to have but never actually show it. Except for what's funny is that Riot Games did show us data, and it was worthless data it was actually kind of hilarious because they didn't understand how impactful that was. We had to weigh the decision on the number of players who were legitimately playing on Linux / the Steam Deck versus the greater health of the population of players for Apex. What is the number of players? While the population of Linux users is small, their impact infected a fair amount of player games. This ultimately brought us down to this. Okay, so it's small, but it somehow affected a fair amount of. You don't make sense when you're making a contradiction here. How can it be small and also so impactful that you have to block the platform? It just doesn't make logical sense to me. Give me numbers rather than just making claims. And also prove the numbers. Don't just say numbers. To eliminate this cheat vector, we have made the decision to prevent access to the game for Linux users. This means that Apex Legends will be unplayable immediately for those running this operating system. Playing on a handheld such as the Steam Deck is still possible if the user opts to install Windows. That is the stupidest statement you could have made. Like, this is already bad, but that one is dumb. Like that, like, if you wanted to completely replace the entire OS, you could, and put a worse OS on it to play this one game that is... To clarify, this will not impact users who play Apex via Steam on Windows. Of course it wouldn't, because they let you have your stupid kernel-level anti-cheat, which is awful, which is basically just a rootkit. To anyone who have heard that Microsoft are getting rid of their kernel-level anti-cheat thing, they're not. That's not true. We talked about this on Twill 278, and the articles that were written about it were just wishful thinking and nothing more than that. So you can check out that information on Twill 278. We'll have links in the show notes for the details on that. But yeah, this is terrible news in the sense that EA is, well, I mean, EA being lame is not in any way surprising. They've done a lot of things over the years. But yeah, Apex Legends was a cool game that we could play, and now we can't. So I guess it's no longer a cool game, because that's how that works. They end the tweet with, "Thanks for everyone's continual support, and we look forward to sharing future anti-cheat updates." Yes, but the entire gaming community is looking forward to your future anti-cheat updates. We love them. They're wonderful. Also, thanks for everyone's continual support. Thanks for continuing to not support Linux. That's great. Sarcasm. If you didn't get that, that was sarcasm. Valve have announced this week that they are making some changes to the store pages on Steam so that games that use some kind of anti-cheat will now have to say which tool they use explicitly on the store. This is good news because it makes it easier for people to know if there may be some kind of compatibility issue with Linux and the Steam Deck. But at the same time, it's also a shame it had to come to this. But overall, I do think this is a good update for Steam because it gives us more information as gamers whether or not we're going to have to deal with some headaches. So that's good. So in the Steamworks developer post, Valve said, "We've heard from more and more developers recently that they're looking for the right way to share anti-cheat information about their game with players. At the same time, players have been requesting more transparency around the anti-cheat services used in games, as well as the existence of any additional software that will be installed within the game." With this feedback in mind, we've added a new field in the Edit Store page section where developers can indicate any anti-cheat software that is installed with the game. Once filled out, the data will be displayed to the users on the game's store Steam page. So, as you can see, there's an example of includes anti-cheat software Punkbuster and also includes easy anti-cheat requires manual removal. Now, this is an important piece here because this one is uninstalled once you're done with the game, if you uninstall the game. And this one you have to also uninstall separately, just like with Riot Games' Vanguard tool, where actually easy anti-cheat is slightly better than the Riot Games version because easy anti-cheat, at least, it doesn't uninstall itself, but at least it doesn't run at all times, regardless if you're playing the game or not. It only runs when the game is running, whereas the Vanguard rootkit is running at all times, which is just an insane thing to me. So I think the most important piece here is that it's not just new games that are being added to the store. They're saying that if your game installs a client-side kernel mode anti-cheat, you will need to fill out this field, regardless of when the game was added to the Steam store, which is fantastic. I think that is important to require it, and also to make it, any game that's ever done it needs to go in and say that they have it, because it's good for the gamers to know that this is something they may have to install. And I feel like this is actually better for the gamers, because it's going to let us know what games require us to have rootkits in our systems in order to play them. So that's good. Also important is that not all anti-cheats are created equal. Some of them are kernel level and some of them are not. So they have some checkboxes in this field that specifies whether it is kernel level integration or not, and whether or not it cleans up files upon uninstall. So that is very nice to see as well. So good job, Valve, in doing this. I feel like it should have been done a little bit earlier, but it's really nice that it's been happening, because especially like what I was saying about the whole kernel level thing and not knowing if they have an anti-cheat. Now we can know for sure if they have one, because researching these topics that I've covered in the past about anti-cheat, it has been hard to find what game uses what anti-cheat, or if they even use one and that sort of stuff. So I like the fact that they're now doing it. I would like for it to some example of like, oh, we don't know for sure. It hasn't been stated yet, or something like that. And another option is saying no anti-cheat, so that we can all have a full transparency around that, because I think that would be the best overall.